So what do you do when you get irons that look like this and you got them for a pretty good deal because they're kind of beat up, but you kind of want them to look new in your bag? Let's figure that out. Hi, my name is Brandon and I love golf and projects, and so this is one of those really great golf projects that you can do as well. And I'm going to show you how to get these irons looking as beat up as they are. And again, they're not crazy, there's just quite a lot of bag chatter. I find that these newer kind of game improvement irons with the badges, they just want to get looking bad quicker. Especially whenever they come and they're just these really fine, polished, just beautiful mirror finish looking irons. It doesn't take more than a few rounds to make them look, well, kind of like this. And there's something to be said for your irons having that kind of bag chatter. That's the amount of time that you've had them in your bag as tools. And so it's really great if you could start wearing them out in the middle here and you can show everyone how great of a ball striker you are. The problem is that these clubs are new to me, and all of this bag chatter, all this stuff, this doesn't reflect me using them as tools, it reflects someone else. So what I want to do is give them a fresh look by, what else? Custom ferrules. That's kind of my thing. So in the case of these Mavrik Max irons, I think I have some really fun ferrules that'll kind of highlight this orange, but will make the clubs feel less orangey. And as much as I really do like just the black ferrules, I think it actually looks really good. It kind of makes this black pop. Ferrules are just a really great way to kind of make your irons feel like they are yours. It's kind of the same thing with grips. You throw new grips on your clubs and they feel brand new. But now with all that out of the way, we're gonna be doing some really simple stuff. We're gonna be doing the classic. I want to polish everything here except for the club face themselves. I want to be really careful around here. We're gonna pull the shafts, and first we're gonna make sure that we get everything swing weighted so that we can get these feeling the same exact way that we got them. And we're gonna keep the grips. And so if you want to know how to keep the grips, just keep watching and I will explain how. Now, I'll always give this disclaimer: if you want your clubs done right, take them in somewhere, pay someone who does it for a living, and you will 100% get a better result than if you just try to wing it yourself from the start. But if you're cool with the trial and error of it and you want to give it a shot and take on a project, then I really recommend buying some of these tools, which I will put in the description below, and you can give this a shot for yourself. Before we do anything, I like to make sure that I'm swing weighting these irons. I like to first get a final weight of what the entire iron weighs, and then I like to use my swing weight scale and get a pretty general swing weight so that I can know how to weight it again. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that the first thing we're gonna do is heat the hosel up right about here, and we're gonna try to get it just hot enough to be able to break that epoxy bond, pull the shaft. Once we've got the shaft out, we're gonna wiggle off this ferrule. 9 times out of 10, when you're doing it this way, you will destroy the ferrules. So you need to make sure that you have new ferrules for when you put them back together. Great, so now we have a head and a shaft that are separated. We can work on them both separately now. It's gonna be a lot easier to polish and sort of refinish our head when we don't have to have this shaft moving around the whole time. While the heads are cooling from being so hot from pulling the shafts, what I'm gonna do is prep the shafts. When I'm prepping the shaft, I'm essentially pulling off all the old epoxy and making new little scratches in the shaft so that the new epoxy will grab onto it. Right about when our heads have cooled off enough, I'm gonna go ahead and take a wire brush bit. And as best I can, I'm gonna drill out all of the epoxy that's left over in there. There will be epoxy that's deep in the hosel and you wanna make sure to get all of that out. This next part is essential. I usually call it the most important part of doing a refinish on an iron. We need to use masking tape, and we need to be really, really careful with how we're applying the masking tape so that we're not polishing any area on this iron that we don't want to. The biggest area you want to stay away from is going to be the club face itself. Trust me when I say that there's a lot that goes into the finish of the club face itself, and it's not something very easily repeatable. But everywhere else, we want to bring life back to. So we're going to make sure and use masking tape on every surface that we don't want shiny. Something that's been useful for me is having masking tape and an Xacto knife. The Xacto knife helps you get really, really, really defined edges, and that really does make all of the difference. Now that we have that out of the way, we can start the abrasion. So what I do is I typically use a Scotch-Brite sort of material that is kind of like a really rough sponge, and that does a good job of making sure that all of the streaks from where it's been hit are kind of equaled down so that you're basically scratching those scratches out. Once we have our first abrasion done, it's gonna look brushed. And if you stop at that brushed finish, you'll actually end up with something like this, which I think is really nice. And you might find that you wanna keep it right there at that sort of brushed look. It does take some skill to actually get it to where it looks really professional brushed. But once you're there, your irons, they're gonna look great. But with these particular irons, we want these to be as shiny as we can get them, so we're gonna keep going with the polishing. So now that we're actually onto like a Sisal wheel or a polishing wheel, we have to use compound. The compound is what actually makes it polish. It's actually really, really fine particles of little tiny pieces of abrasion that actually do the work. So make sure that you use the corresponding compound for the kind of abrasion you're using. In this case, I'm using a Sisal wheel, which requires a black compound. And with the Sisal wheel, you actually start seeing a lot of that shine start coming out. I typically like to do 2 Sisal wheels. So one is a coarse Sisal and another one is something that's a little bit more like the polishing brush. So at this point, I'll take that wheel, throw it on, use the green compound. Now we'll actually start seeing this stuff shine. Between every polish while you're using compound, you're gonna wanna go ahead and run these through soap and water after each polish. Now once you're done with this wheel, you're gonna start really seeing it polish after you've scrubbed it with soap and water. It's going to get better because now we're going to use polishing wheel. Now with the polishing wheel, there's a method called crosshatch. And that basically means that you're going the opposite way that you were going before with a finer abrasion. And what this does is get it to look so mirror-like, you're not gonna believe it. Like, these irons will not look like the same irons. So after you have that polish on it, go ahead and run it through some soap and water again. And now you can do my favorite part, which is taking all that tape off. So now that we've got our iron heads basically ready to go, and we have our shafts prepped, we're gonna go ahead and install these. If you wanna save your grips, there's something really simple you can do to save your grips. See this hole here? That hole does not actually go into the center of the shaft. There's tape that overlaps the inside of the shaft, and it closes off that hole so that dirt won't get in it. But in order to set correctly with the epoxy, we need airflow going out of the shaft this way. Otherwise, while it's curing, it's gonna wanna push the shaft out this way. Really simple fix here. You can just get about a 1/4 inch drill bit and drill out the hole and make sure that no epoxy is left over in the shaft whatsoever, and make sure there is airflow going through it. So it's really simple. As long as you have airflow through this side of the shaft, you're good to go. There's a common misconception that you have to change grips while pulling shafts. It's just not true. Now, that's probably the way you should do it, because then you can check things like spine angle, things like that. However, I'm assuming that when these were made in factory, all that good stuff was already done, and we already have these grips that are lined up. So when we install these, we already know that the shaft is gonna be lined up correctly with the spine, assuming that was done at factory. I hope Callaway would have done that at factory. And now we get to actually setting these bad boys. Something that I like to do is I like to use this stuff called quick center. Little tiny pieces of abrasion, I think it's aluminum or something like that. Don't breathe it in, but you essentially mix that into the epoxy and it creates little pieces of abrasion that get in the middle as you're turning the shaft into the hosel. They get stuck in between the hosel and the shaft, which is actually a good thing because it allows you to have a smaller bond with the epoxy. That's when epoxy works the best, and it's not clumped and thick. And it also does this really great thing of centering the shaft and making sure that the shaft isn't going into the hosel at an angle, because that would really mess with lie angle, that would really mess with your loft maybe, all kinds of things. You can use all kinds of epoxies, but the epoxy I like to use is called Tour Set, and it just sets way faster. So just make sure you're using absolutely equal parts. Something that I like to do is I draw out 10 lines of one part, then 10 lines of the other part. And then I'll mix that for like 20 seconds, throw in the quick center, and then mix it for another 20 seconds. Once you have that figured out, the biggest thing you need to do is make sure that you clean up after yourself with this stuff. The stuff does get everywhere if you don't catch it. So you wanna make sure to clean everything up that you can before it hardens, because it's so hard to clean off once it's hardened. The next step is to grab your ferrule, throw just a little bit of epoxy on the inside of that ferrule and slide it onto the shaft. Then what I like to do is take the tip of the shaft, put it in a little bit of the epoxy right on the edge there, and start turning it into the hosel. I like to think of this as coating the inside of the hosel, because we're not going to actually push the whole thing through here, but something that I like to do is kind of work the shaft inside and outside of the hosel while I'm spinning it around. That just helps make sure that you're not getting air bubbles and that you're actually pushing a lot of that into the center of the hosel. Once you feel like you're getting some in the hosel, I'll go ahead and take it back out, put my other kind of bit on the tip of that shaft, and then go ahead and spin it again. But this time, I will press down firmly on the head, making sure that the shaft goes all the way down to the center of the hosel. That will also push the ferrule down where it needs to be. And I will start making sure to twist the whole thing, work it all the way in and all the way out. And of course, clean up all of the epoxy that's going to kind of work its way out in the process. So once you've done that and you feel good about it, it's time to align the club. Something that I like to use are these clamps, which hold the shaft and hold the hosel together. Another thing you can do is just use masking tape. It typically has enough give to be able to still do a little bit of alignment. So you're gonna wanna set the club in playing position and make sure that that grip alignment is perfectly aligned with the square position of the club. Once you've got it, that's great. What you can do is turn that club around and you're gonna give it a big, meaty tap to make sure that it sets right in the middle of the hosel. That's gonna make sure that everything dries up perfectly square. And now the club goes up against a wall to rest. I typically will give it a good 24 hours. Some tour sets say that they're actually playable in about 4 to 6 hours. I just don't know if I would trust that. And then 24 hours later, you've got clubs. You can go out and hit them and they'll work. But there's a couple of cosmetic things that we need to do first to finish these irons. One is that you'll notice the ferrule is almost always a little bit bigger than the hosel of the iron. So we do this thing called turning the ferrules, and it's actually a pretty intense ordeal if you're just getting into building clubs. It actually turns out that the ferrules can almost be a sign of how well that club was built by club makers. The easiest thing to do, in my opinion, is to shine up the ferrules using just acetone, and that allows you a lot of forgiveness in being able to shape the ferrules, only it takes a really long time and it's really messy. So what I like to do is throw a felt belt in my belt sander and turn the ferrules that way. Now the last step is gonna be polishing that ferrule to where it's really, really shiny. And we do that with acetone. So get a lint-free cloth. I usually will fold it into 4s so that it's got some thickness to it. And I will absolutely douse it in acetone. And then very quickly, I will do a vertical pattern and turn the whole iron to make sure that it's completely covered in that acetone. If you just leave it alone, it'll actually dry and it'll be really, really shiny. After you've let that dry for a couple minutes, go ahead and take a microfiber cloth, or you could even use a paper towel, and you're gonna wipe off all of the rest of the parts that the acetone kind of bled onto. And there you have it. We have brand new clubs. Well, not brand new. And that's the thing, they will not look brand new because they have been hit, and well, you have to pay a lot of money if you want brand new clubs. But you have to admit that they look a heck of a lot better. Any wear that goes onto those clubs will actually be your wear. And I don't know, there's just something really great about a new ferrule. So the next time you're on the market for some new irons, it is possible to save a little bit of money, have some fun, and start a project while creating some sort of relationship to the irons that you're playing. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. We have a lot coming up that I'm really excited about that aren't just tinkering club videos, but if you're also into that, I'm gonna be doing a lot of it. And then a truly great barometer for me is if you liked the video, go ahead and drop a like. If you didn't, then dislike it and let me know what I can be doing better. Because I'm new to this and I could always use some constructive criticism, but I know that it takes time to watch things like this, and I really appreciate you choosing to spend it with me. So go out, build some clubs, or buy some clubs from someone who can build some clubs, and just have fun with this game.